You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
All right, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and joined, as always, by your co-host, Kevin. Kevin, how are we doing tonight?
I'm good, man. It is conference championship weekend. If you're a college football fanatic, I think I subscribe to that. I love watching college football because, if you know what players are coming out in college, it helps you when you're strategizing and how it's going to play out in the NFL. So, watch a ton of it. There's a great one going on right now in Oregon, Washington. But, overall, we're getting ready for the home stretch, right? We basically have 2 more weeks. Some leagues only have 1 more week for weird playoff settings that, haven't quite changed yet. But the time is now, right? Trade deadlines, if they haven't passed already, are basically done here this week. And, we have rosters cemented. And so now it's maneuvering what you have on the roster, maybe finding a late gem on the waiver wire, i.e. Pat Fryermuth, maybe Zach Moss, if you were lucky enough to get them this week. But, other than that, we're rocking and rolling, man. We are cooking, and I'm ready to start winning some cash and trophies. How are you?
I am hanging in there. We're doing the good, as they say. So, it'll be very interesting to see here too. Some of the slates of games that we've got kind of coming up, and some of the storylines coming through here, and just kind of all the things when we're talking football here. So it's going to be a very, very interesting week and weekend here. So there's kind of lots of different things I'm going to keep my eye on, keeping the finger on the pulse, so to speak. But it should be a good game here. Like there's some of those that I'm more excited about some of the matchups this week than I was looking at like last week's slates of games, right? Like that was a little bit tough last week. This week, I feel like we have probably a little bit more exciting matchups here. They may not necessarily be better matchups, just more exciting in my eye.
No, I'd agree. I think there's a little bit more playoff implications coming in this week. I mean, even started Thursday night, right? That Dallas-Seattle game was penalty ridden, right? The referees kind of took that one over, which sucks. But the play, when the plays stood, that game was on fire, man. Lots of back and forth, lots of air yards. Geno looked like the Geno from last year. DK had an amazing showing, which people who have kept him and started him all season long have been kind of waiting for this type of game. So congratulations, you got it. Dak and CD continue to be a combination that if you have one, the other, or both on your roster heading into the playoffs, you got to feel good about your chances, even with Dallas's schedule coming up. Like lots and lots of good things that came out of that Thursday night game. So, and then it continues in Philly and San Francisco. Going to be a great game. I think that the Colts, right, after beating Tampa Bay and trying to get into this wild card picture, stay in it. Great. Houston, Denver, right? Who would have thought when the schedule came out that we'd be talking about Houston and Denver being a playoff relevant game this late in the season? But it is. Houston, dropping that game to Jacksonville hurts them a little bit. So now they're fighting for a wild card spot. Denver's arguably the hottest team in the NFL right now, if you're just looking at wins that they've strung together and quality opponents that they've beat. So it should be a really good game. And I'm going to spin off of that for real quick. I was looking at the map of what games are being aired throughout the nation. Houston, Denver has like 75% of the United States.
Wow. I hadn't dove that deep there. That's crazy.
It is nuts. So the only markets that aren't carrying the Houston, Denver games are the home markets for other teams that play at that time slot. Like other than that, it is Houston, Denver. It is absolutely nuts.
Right. Like
I hope it's as good as advertised. Right. I hope it's competitive. I hope it's good football. with it essentially being a nationally televised game, right? It's dang near. This is about as close as you can get to a nationally televised game. Um, so I do hope both teams show out. We got a young, exciting quarterback in CJ Stroud, and what he's been able to do as a rookie has been awesome. Fantasy managers are absolutely singing his praises for being able to really step up in a year where a lot of quarterbacks have been hurt. CJ Stroud's been one of those nice surprises where if you took him as your second quarterback, or if you were even able to get him off the waiver wire, like many people were, he has essentially saved your season.
Mm-hmm.
Because it saves you from having to play Gardner Minshew and Bailey Zappi and Mac Jones and whatever DeVito and Daniel Jones and you know Wilson and now Joe Flacco, right? All these guys, it saves you from having to do that.
Absolutely. And it's also kind of crazy too when you look at it too, right? Like I was just kind of going through some of the playoff scenarios out there, right? Like Denver actually after this week, Denver and or Houston, right? Whoever wins that game actually could be slided in as a wild card seed here going into week 14, right? Because right now as it
Mhm.
sits, it looks like Indianapolis has the kind of that seventh wild card or that seventh seed right now, just based off of some tiebreakers going on there. But if they happen to lose, and that's going to be a tough matchup between them and Tennessee. Right? If they lose, and then if they lose, the winner of Denver and Houston is slides into that seventh spot. So like, there's a whole lot that's at stake for these teams going into it, and this is one that will be very interesting on how that plays out, right? Like it really is kind of crazy when you start kind of putting it bigger picture, right? Like who would have thought at the beginning of the season we were talking about Houston, Denver, and the Colts being ahead of Buffalo and the Bengals, right? The Bills and the
Yikes.
Bengals to be in ahead of them in the playoff race this late into the season, like. I don't know that anybody saw that one coming.
Uh, Definitely not me. I mean, I'm not going to speak for anybody else. I will speak for myself. Definitely not me. I did not see this. So, um, and heck, e- even with Indianapolis, right? They lost their starting quarterback in Anthony Richardson, and what they've been able to do as a team, right? They cut Shaq Leonard
Mm-hmm.
because of chronic injuries and amongst a couple other things, but wanted some young guys to be able to get some playing time and continue to develop, and didn't want to pay Shaq Leonard what they owed him for him to continue to be hurt. Um, and the Broncos, right? It will never be forgotten the whooping that got placed on them by Miami in week 3. Never. It's historical. Um, but this team has done a really good job reflecting inward, buying into the system, right? Not only Sean Payton's offensive system, but really buying into what Vance Joseph was trying to accomplish. They cut some high profile free agent acquisitions, right? And Frank Clark and Randy Gregory, and they've gotten better. It has been addition by subtraction, which you don't see a whole lot in the NFL, but some bad contracts, some bad personalities, and giving youth a chance that they're hungry, that they're excited, and it just kind of catches fire. And this is what's fun about the NFL, right? It does kind of catch fire. You don't see this in college. The front
Right.
runners are the front runners pretty much all season long. You can list out your top 15 teams at the beginning of the season, and somewhere in those ranks, 95% of the time, that's where the top 15 is going to end up.
Right.
The NFL, we've seen what roughly 40% of the playoff field changes over every year. And because these guys are professionals and they obviously all take pride in their craft, you can have a couple bad games. But once you get clicking and can catch fire, you look like a completely different franchise, much like the Broncos, even the Texans to some extent, with how well CJ Stroud has taken over and kind of morphed this offense into uh, I dare say high powered, but at least exciting. And you put forth a really good product. And the two sides of the ball feed off of each other because of that. So this is the fun part, man. It is exciting. It's a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, and the kind of the crazy thing too, right? I was looking through some things in the AFC. If you're a first year head coach, like right now they're all kind of fighting for that 7th seed, for that wild card there, right? So some big turnarounds from a lot of rosters and a lot of squads there, a lot of organizations. So very interesting. Whereas when you look at like the NFC, a lot of the first year head coaches are fighting for very early draft capital.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, so we've got a ton of things to kind of cover and go over here. Make sure if you got questions, comments along the ways, let's make sure that we're getting those in the chat here and we're hitting those up and we're rocking and rolling through it, helping you guys get your questions, answers, lineup sets, all that kind of good stuff here for week 13. Let's go ahead and hit the, we do have a comment coming in here. Let's go ahead and hit this one up. So Gigi, welcome back in the chat, Gigi. Sup, fellas? What defense special team would you roll out in first round of playoffs? Cleveland, Chicago, or Cleveland versus Chicago, Baltimore versus the Jags, Dallas at Buffalo.
So I think Baltimore has the safest floor, but I like the idea of Cleveland being at home.
Uh-huh.
Cleveland has played much better at home. It will help them kind of maintain balance, if you will, on offense. And whether it's DTR, whether it's Joe Flacco again, like quarterback situation aside, for what the defense can do in creating turnovers and really kind of rallying behind that crowd, having home field does help. But Baltimore probably provides your safest floor just because that defense has been a wrecking crew here lately.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I agreed with you, right? Like if Cleveland's on the road in that one, Cleveland moves all the way to the last team that I'm picking for that one, right? Like even Dallas and the way the Bills have been, turning over the ball on the offensive side of it, and Dallas being very opportunistic on that, like they can create some turnovers there. They're a team that seemingly finds a way to put the ball in the end zone as a defense. So, like, yeah, there's some very exciting things there, but I think I'm right there with you, right? Like Baltimore given the safest floor, Cleveland at home, like that combo. So I don't think you have a bad option there on any one of the three, Gigi, but so some of it's going to depend on what you need, right? If you just need somebody to go out there and make sure that you get some points, Baltimore's your deal. If you need a little bit of upside, probably Cleveland. So great question. Like it. Again, if you had any questions, all that good stuff, let's throw them in the chat. Let's talk about them. Let's get those things rocking and rolling. Do we want to start hitting some matchups here?
Yeah, let's go ahead and start jumping into it.
All righty. Here we go. Week 13, we got the Indianapolis Colts squaring off against the Tennessee Titans. Indy favored by 1. The over-under on this one, 42.5. Thoughts on this one?
I'm gonna take Indy here. I think they're finding their stride here a little bit. And even with losing Jonathan Taylor, we've seen what Zach Moss was able to do at the beginning of the season. So I don't think that while it's a step back, it's not damning. So the Colts are in good position there. And the fact that the Titans secondary is still pretty suspect, it plays into what Minshew likes to do, which is sling it. And I think he's going to be able to do that here a little bit. Divisional matchup. So I think we're going to see some back and forth. I do think we see the under just barely, but I think Cleveland's able to squeak out a win here. Like it wouldn't surprise me if it was 21-20 or 20-17, 20-18, something like that. But I do think Indy comes out on top in this game.
Fair enough. I'm kind of on the other side of this one. I do think that Tennessee finds a way to get this thing done. They've been very good at home. I think that they can find a way to pull this thing out here. Indy was able to really bottle up Derrick Henry in the first matchup here, right? But historically, Derrick Henry has very good games against the Colts. And right now, too, Indy's missing a couple of key pieces along that defensive line here that I think it's going to allow Derrick Henry to have a very good game when it's all said and done. I do think that the under comes into play, right? Like this is one of those that score you mentioned, that 21-20, like I think we're going to get a nail biter that comes down to, who has the ball last type of thing. Like it's going to go all the way down to the wire on this one. That being said, though, part of the problem is that I also think you're right when you say that Indy's going to be able to move the ball through the air on this one. Part of the problem is Gardner Minshew has a hard time. The teams that Gardner Minshew plays for has a hard time winning when Gardner Minshew is 300 yards or more, and I think that there's a chance he can touch 300 yards passing in this game. So that being the case, I'm going with Tennessee. One of the props I really like, Derrick Henry, to go over his rushing prop of 61.5 yards.
Very good. I'm going to take Michael Pittman over 72.5. I think he's going to be a linchpin, and he's definitely the go-to guy for Minshew.
I like it. I like that one so much. I was looking at doing that one, and I ended up pivoting to the Henry, but that was a very close second that I was eyeing really hard there. So I like it. All righty, let's go ahead and hit the Chargers taking on New England. The Chargers favored by 5.5. The over/under on this one, 40.5. Thoughts on this one?
I like Kansas City here. New England's just a mess, right? They're a mess at quarterback. They're kind of a mess offensively all the way around. The Chargers' weakness being the secondary, it's what New England's terrible at. So I think while Ramondre will be okay, I do think he's going to get stymied here a little bit, and New England does not have the pass catchers to keep up. So I think the Chargers go into town, handle their business, win this one by a touchdown. I think we do see the over, because I think New England's probably good for 13 points, right? And I know I just said by a touchdown, but would it surprise anyone if Chargers finally uncork and they're able to unleash Austin Eckler here a little bit and get right? So I'm rooting for the over here, but I think the Chargers cover nonetheless.
Yeah, I would love to root for the over on this one with all the fantasy players, in these matchups here and all of that. But I can't in good conscience get there, just from the standpoint that I really don't know that we can trust that Patriots offense to put up, to even get to 13. I think that they're going to be lucky to get to double digits on this one. Plus, as much as I wanted to be like, I can't trust, the Chargers to cover this one, I'm going to go that route just because I think I trust the Chargers talent to get that done a little bit more so than the coaching decisions that are made. That anyway, taking the Chargers, going to take the under on this one. Really glad that we're going to be having other games to be televised in the area. But that being said, I'm going to lean on Bailey Zappi to go over his passing prop of a whopping 177.5 yards. We've seen Bailey Zappi come in relief before and start before, and he tends to have pretty electric games here. So that being the case, I think that he's able to move the ball up and down the field a little bit. I just think the Patriots have a hard time punching in the end zone. So Bailey Zappi over the 177.5 passing yards.
Very good. I'm going to take Austin Eckler over 3.5 receptions. Like, they just got to continue to get him involved between him and Keenan Allen to move this offense, because if they can't get the two of them going, they do seem to struggle a little bit.
Certainly. All right, let's go ahead and hit up a couple of questions here. So Terrence, welcome back in, Terrence. Terrence over on YouTube saying, start Stroud or Lawrence this week?
I'm starting Lawrence this week over Stroud, and that's just because the Broncos have just been so stinking hot. Really the only quarterback to put up fantasy relevant points against them was Josh Allen, and that's because he also had a rushing touchdown. So they shut Mahomes down twice. Jordan Love didn't do squat. Allen was okay. And then obviously the Cleveland experiment, which was not good for them. So it's a really good hot defense right now. Stroud could get you there, but I think Lawrence is the safer play this week.
Yeah, I would agree with that one. I think you're right. I think Lawrence gets you the safer play on this one. Stroud certainly has a better ceiling, but it's far more volatile on this one. because I could see CJ Stroud blowing up and having like a 19, 20 point week on this one. But I could also see him down there at like 11 or 12 points as well. Whereas I think with Trevor Lawrence, you're going to get a pretty safe, 15, 16, maybe even 17 points type of thing. Like, much safer range on that one. Terrence also saying that he needs to start 2 running backs at a flex, has Kyron Williams, Achane, Hall, Najee, Ford, Pickens, and Cooper.
You're starting Kyron.
Yep. I think you're starting Brees. And I think I'm going to take the Najee train going up on the Arizona. Like, that's a plus matchup. And Najee's a guy that's delivered you're just back to back to back to back top 24 weeks.
Yeah. And I'm okay with that. I know that everyone's attached to Achan's massive weeks that he had, weeks, 3, 4,
3, 4, 5.
5, right? But the last time we saw him on the field, he played 3 snaps and really hosed fantasy managers. And this close to the playoffs in games that we absolutely have to have, I will forgive him, but I'm not going to forget. And so by not forgetting, I'm going to hedge my bets here a little bit. And yes, Atlanta's been pretty stout against the run, but yeah, Kyron. I might even go Ford and Harris.
Okay.
Honestly, like Cooper is interesting, but I don't know how rusty Flacco is.
Right.
Like, that part is a little interesting to me. Like, Cooper's interesting. It's not Pickens. Like, George Pickens right now. Just the whole Pittsburgh pass catching offense, right? Freiermuth came out and had himself a really good game, but they're not using Pickens very well here the last 5 weeks, 6 weeks almost. So you can't start Pickens no matter what. Kyron's the smash. I'm all about Najee kind of being the 2. And then I might lean forward, but I'm not going to hate anybody for playing Hall this week if that's where your roster tells you that you need to play.
Yeah, I could get that. Amari Cooper could have that very interesting thing, right? Like, one of the things about Joe Flacco is he hyper fixates on a guy and just targets him like crazy. So, but I also don't think that the Browns are going to let him do what the Jets did the last time we saw Joe Flacco on a football field, where he was dropping back and rifling it all over the place 50 times a game. Like, I just don't see them going that route there. So, yeah, I think I'm with the Kyron, Hall, Najee, but Ford over Hall, I could do that one too. I could see that one. So you've got kind of the thoughts there, Terrence, and you can roll how you like it then. Ajiji, what 3 running backs you rolling out this week? Gibbs, Monty, Swift, White, Warren, full point PPR. For sure, White. Right, they're going up against Carolina. It's a very plus matchup there. Swift has got a tough matchup against the 49ers. Detroit has a little bit of a tougher matchup with New Orleans, but both Gibbs, Monty, you're going to run only one of them out. Between the 2, I'm going to roll Monty on that one just because the touchdown upside is higher, I do believe. So then it kind of comes down to Swift or Warren.
I think I'm going Swift over Warren. I think I would go Gibbs, Swift, and White is who I would roll with this week.
Okay. I mean, I could see that one as well, but and then you're right. Like, on the full point PPR, it kind of swings it more towards Gibb over Monty. Monty's going to get the ground and pound and get the goal line work, but that could be one of those that game's a little bit tighter, and we could see Gibbs a little bit more involved through the passing game.
Yes.
All right, I'll jump on the Gibbs train with you.
So there you go. Gibbs, Swift, White.
Boom. Not often you get a unanimous, but that's a unanimous. Usually it's
I'll
just
get
a
in.
consensus based. All right, here we go. Tingley saying, "Ayo, start one flex, full PPR." Wow, words were tough tonight. Moss, Pacheco, or Achan. Between Pacheco and Moss for me.
I'm going Pacheco. The Green Bay's weakness is through the run game. And while a strong pass defense has never scared away Patrick Mahomes, I think Moss is going to have to break one loose against Tennessee to get there this week, as far as it being your best flex starter. Achan definitely has the highest upside against a terrible Washington team. But again, I'm a little weary just because 2 weeks ago we saw him play 3 snaps and he re-aggravated that knee injury. So
Right.
I am a little hesitant on the Achan. So that leads me to trust Pacheco, because I would tell you he probably has the safest floor going up against Green Bay. We'll see him get a couple a little bit of pass work. And it wouldn't surprise me if he is the focal point of the offense this week, just because of how Green Bay plays defense.
Right. Not only that, right? Like you look at the game script on this thing. Kansas City's defense has been pretty good. Jordan Love's been a little bit prone to turnovers here and there, right? He's been pretty good these last couple of weeks. And then we've kind of seen that trend play out more than once, where he has a couple of really good weeks. Then he has a week where he has 2 or 3 turnovers to it. So Kansas City could be turning the ball over there. That wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. And we could then see Pacheco use a little bit heavier, try and just kind of manage that clock a little bit, keep that clock moving, running, shorten the game down. It's on the road. Like there's lots of things that come into play there that lead me towards the Pacheco. So I'm right there with you. Pacheco would be my first call.
There you have it.
As Gigi saying, cool. Alrighty. So let's go ahead and get into our next matchup here. And again, guys, you have any questions, throw them in the chat here. Let's rock and roll through them. Next matchup, we got the Lions taking on the Saints. Detroit favored by 4.5. Over under on this one, 46.5. Thoughts on this one?
I'm taking Detroit because they have responded well off of losses. What a dud they put up on Thanksgiving. It was really disappointing. But nevertheless, here we are. It's another week. They've done a good job of bouncing back. They had kind of a mini bye, if you will, right? The extra few days to get back in, watch some extra film, get their bodies right, get their minds right. And I think they're going to be back on the quest. They're a couple weeks away from locking up the NFC North. So that is goal number 1. And then you worry about, getting yourself right for the playoffs. So I'm going to take Detroit being on a mission to come out and win this game. And then I'm going to take the under just ever so slightly. I think this game ends up at a 44 total. So call it 20. What is it? 26-17 or 27-17, something like that.
Yeah, I could see that one. And I've got the under as well. I think that we just see that come in to play on this one. I do like Detroit to respond for a lot of the same reasons you just kind of stated there. So not going to go into a ton of detail there. But yeah, I do think that we're going to see what should be a pretty decent game overall. It'll be interesting to see, right, to how there's a couple of things I'm really watching this thing for, to see, like, one, continuing to see kind of that split in the Detroit backfield on how that continues to play out going forward on that one, as well as the fact looking to see, one, does Chris Olave, clear the concussion protocol? Are we going to see him out there? And what, was last week kind of a fluke type of thing, or are we going to see Derek Carr really target Chris Olave and get him very involved here? So those are a couple of things I'm really going to be having my eye on this game here. But as far as a prop that I really like Monty to find the end zone on this one. So I'm calling for a Monty anytime touchdown.
All right. I'm going to take Jared Goff over 34.5 pass attempts. I think the run game's can be a little tight, just strictly on the ground. So wouldn't surprise me if the Saints might even take an early lead and just kind of force the Lions to sling it a little bit more than what they originally were anticipating.
I like it. All righty. Next matchup, we've got the Falcons taking on the Jets. Atlanta favored by 2. The over-under on this one, 33.5. Thoughts on this one?
I'm 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 torn on this one. I have the Jets on our show doc, so I guess I'm going to stick with that. Um, and I think it's only because I think the defense is there. They've activated for whatever reason. They activated Aaron Rodgers from uh, the IR. So right, they have a 3-week window. I think that they believe that if they can find a way to win these next 3 weeks, and it's a tough 3 games. This is going to be the easiest one for them by far. But if they can find a way to get these next 3 games and get back to 500, they have a puncher's chance. And that's kind of what Aaron Rodgers does best. So I'm going to take an energized New York Jets team, finding a way to move the ball just enough to squeak out a low scoring victory in this game.
Yeah, this is a matchup that again I'm glad we are getting a different game in market here. So because this is going to be a tough one to watch if you like offense, right? There's probably not going to be much of it. This is one of those games that yeah, might find a prop out there where it's 0 touchdowns scored type of thing and just, see what kind of odds those things are, because this could very well be a 9-6 type of game. All of it coming off of field goals there. So that being said, I'm definitely taking the under on this one. I do think that Atlanta finds a way to squeak one out here. The division leading Falcons find a way to get a win here on the road. As far as a prop that I like, I'm going to be looking at Tyler Conklin to go over 22.5 receiving yards.
I'm going to take Garrett Wilson over 50.5.
I really like that one too. All righty. Next matchup, we got the Cardinals taking on the Steelers. Pittsburgh favored by 5.5. The over under 41.5. Thoughts on this one?
I'm going to take Pittsburgh here. This defense has been on a little bit of a run. The offense has looked better, not great, but better since relieving Matt Canada of his duties. A little bit more free flowing. They're not quite as what's the word I'm looking for? They're not so stagnant. It's a little bit more fun, and it's not quite as predictable. I think that's the word I was originally looking for as I was rambling through that. So I'm going to take Pittsburgh. I'm going to take the under, though. I think Pittsburgh's defense is going to be able to slow down Arizona's offense while their own offense continues to find its way here a little bit. So Pittsburgh and the under for me.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you, right? I'm going to take the under. I think this is going to be a low scoring game. Not going to surprise me if we see a kind of that 20-14 type of scoring on this one. So I do think that Pittsburgh finds a way to get it done at home there, right? Like I think they find a way to get it done at home. That defense does just enough, right? It looks like we might see Minkah Fitzpatrick back on the field here for the Steelers. That would definitely help them out on the defensive side of the ball there as well. One of the props that I'm looking at and I'm kind of liking here is Jaylen Warren over 16.5 receiving yards.
Very good. I think that hits pretty easily. I'm going to take Pat Fryermuth over 3.5 receptions.
I like that. My my team in the home league would like that as well.
There you go.
All righty. Let's go ahead and hit that next matchup here. We've got the Dolphins taking on the Commanders. Miami favored by 9.5. The over-under on this one, 49.5. Thoughts on this one?
Miami. It's not double digits yet. I bet it's double digits by the time we kick off, but being a road favorite by this amount typically has not gone well for the road team, but I think Washington's pretty much packing it in. They're getting ready to clean house. They have enough problems as it is. I think Ron Rivera's kind of lost this team a little bit, even with firing Jack Del Rio. I don't think a whole lot's going to change defensively. They're going to have problems, and with what Dallas did to Washington through the air. I think Miami can do that the same, right? They have Tyreek and Jalen Waddle. So I think they took lots of notes, and we're gonna see some fireworks in this one. So I'm gonna take the over because I do think Washington will keep pace for about the first half, and then Miami will pull away starting the third quarter.
Yeah, I think you're right on that one. I think that we're going to see a fair bit of points on this one. I don't know that we're going to get as many points as we just got yesterday in that Dallas and Seattle game, but I think we'll get we'll clear the 50 points on this one here.
Mm.
I do like Miami, right? Like you said it earlier, the road teams when they're big favorites like that really have not done well, but I do think that Miami gets the job done here. Washington, I just don't see them being able to slow them down. So taking Miami, taking the over. One of the props I really like was Terry McLaurin under 57.5 receiving yards. Terry McLaurin's been very consistent out there for fantasy. However, that consistency is in that vein of 3-4 receptions for about 50 yards. So I think we see just on the under, maybe he falls into the end zone. But from a yardage perspective, I think we're going to see 50 or less on this thing. With the prop at 57, definitely taking it.
There you go. I'm taking Brian Robinson over 39.5 rushing yards. Again, I think Washington keeps this close in the first half, which makes this well within striking distance for Robinson. Um, I wouldn't surprise me if he has about 35, 36 yards at halftime, and then he's able to go out and get another 10, 15 right away in the second half.
Like it. All righty. Next matchup, we got the Broncos taking on the Texans. Houston's favored by 3. The over-under is 47 on this one. Thoughts on this one?
Taking Denver. I'm not loving the fact that I'm taking Denver because typically they play better when I pick against them. But
Yes,
I'm
they
taking
do.
Denver to cover the 3. We'll see. I do think this game is more of a coin flip than anything. But I'm going to take the fact that the defense has been traveling. They will continue to do so. So Denver covers. But I think we see the under. I think it's going to be a pretty low scoring affair here in this game.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And I think you're right. I do think that we see the under on this one. I'm also going to take Denver on this one here and would feel anyway. I'm taking Denver. I'm taking the under. This is one of those that I think that this game is gonna be very much a back and forth. Very well could come down to whoever has the ball last on this thing. And realistically, when I was kind of mapping this thing out, I think it's going to be about a 24-21 type of game. So just under. One of the props that I like was Devin Singletary to find more than 10.5 receiving yards.
I like that. I think that hits. I'm going to take Jerry Judy over 3.5 receptions. I do think he gets to 4 in this game.
Yep, I could definitely see that one coming to play. All righty, next matchup, we've got the Panthers versus the Buccaneers. Tampa Bay is favored by 5. The over-under on this one, 36.5. Thoughts here?
Taking Carolina. I do think Tampa Bay wins this game outright, but I think this team's going to rally with Frank Reich getting fired. I think a lot of players are not sitting overly well with this. So I think that this is one of those situations where they're going to go out and kind of win one for the Gipper. So, and really by winning, I just mean covering. It wouldn't surprise me. Tampa Bay wins this game by 3. And we see a higher scoring affair. I think 36.5 is just a little low. I think we get to 40 points here in this game. So I'm going to take the over, but Carolina is going to cover the 5.
Fair enough. Yeah, this is one of those that when you see a coach usually dismissed like this one, the players definitely go one of two ways, right? Like the organization kind of goes into a even further tailspin than they already were, or you see the guys band together and win one, right? Like we even saw the Colts last year with the after Frank Reich got let go, Jeff Saturday came in, they pulled it out a win there, and then completely kind of came off the rails the rest of the way. So. Mm-hmm. Very much could be right. Like the fact that they let multiple coaches go on this one, not just the head coach, but also relieve the quarterback's coach, the running back's coach. Like they relieved a whole lot of the offensive side of the ball on this one. I'm not buying into the fact that that's going to solve the issues for Bryce Young and being able to move the ball and not turn the ball over and all of those things. So I'm going to take Tampa Bay. on this one. I do think that we see the under in this one. I think this is a deal that we're going to see Rachaad White just absolutely have a field day in this one, right? Carolina incredibly bad at stopping running backs. And so I think the Tampa Bay is going to come out, run the ball, and we're going to see Rachaad White be the benefactor, having a huge day and going well past his 62.5 rushing yard prop.
I like it. I'm going to take Mike Evans over 4.5 receptions.
Okay. I could see that one coming to play too. I like it. Alrighty. Next matchup, we got the Browns and the Rams. And the Rams favored by 3.5, the over under 40.5. Thoughts on this one?
I'm going to take Cleveland to cover the 3.5. And I think it's the hook that does it. I wouldn't be surprised if LA wins this game, just because we're not quite sure what Joe Flacco is going to look like. Traveling on the road is not always the easiest thing. But I do think we see some points. Again, Cleveland not as good on the road as they are at home. So I think that leads the Rams to be able to find some points. But ultimately, the run game in Cleveland, I think they're able to do just enough, kind of muck up this game a little bit, make things difficult on Matt Stafford, who will turn the ball over from time to time. And keep this game within striking distance. So I'm going to take Cleveland to cover, and I'm going to take the over. I think we find a way to get to, 24-20 or something like that.
Fair enough. This is one of those that I could see this one getting a little bit scory on this one. Like, wouldn't surprise me if we looked up and we saw a 30-27 type of matchup on this one. So I'm taking the over as well. Wouldn't surprise me that throughout part of this game, we almost see a little bit of some dueling quarterbacks trying to go, and we see lots of passing start coming into play here. So I am taking the Rams. I am going to take the over, as I do think that the Rams find a way to get this thing done. That hook definitely has me not totally confident about that call, but one of the props I really like was Puka Nacua to go over his prop of 4.5 receptions.
I like that. I'm taking Joe Flacco over 0.5 passing touchdowns. I think he finds David Njoku for one.
Yeah, I could see that one. Njoku definitely been having some heaters here along the last few. So let's look. Hopefully that continues.
Yeah.
All righty. Next matchup, we got the Niners facing off against the Eagles. San Francisco favored by 3 in this one. Over under 47.5. Thoughts on this one?
I'm taking the Niners in the over. Philadelphia has been squeaking by some games that they probably should have been playing a little bit better. They realize it's not their best football right now, and I think this is the wake-up call that they're going to need. So I do think San Francisco is able to go into Philly and steal one. Wouldn't surprise me if the game's a push because of a late surgence by the Eagles. However, I think the Niners win this game fairly comfortably, and are able to not put everybody on notice because we know that they're a good team already, but re-cement themselves as a powerhouse in the NFC after dropping those 3 consecutive games previous to their bye week.
Right. Yeah, that very well could come to play. Now, this is one of those two that you saw. This is definitely that rematch of the NFC Championship game last year, right? And this was one of those that when these two teams squared off against it, and you heard a whole lot about it after the game, that if Brock Purdy hadn't gone down, like the Niners players were definitely chirping that they would have been able to beat it and win and all of that kind of stuff, right? And that's one of those things tend to resonate and stick a little bit. Philadelphia is certainly not a city that forgets that or allows those types of things to be forgotten. So I do think that there's that Philly's going to come into this game with a chip on their shoulder. I do think that they find a way to pull out a win, right? Like you said earlier, they haven't been playing necessarily the greatest football, but they are finding ways to just get wins. I do think that they managed to pull this one out at home. I do think that we see the over come into play. One of the props that I like, though, was Jalen Hurts to go under 43.5 rushing yards. Nope, that's one.
Sorry. I'm taking AJ Brown over 71.5 receiving yards.
I like that one. I think that we've had a couple of down weeks from AJ Brown. I think we see a big resurgence on this one here. All righty. Sunday night, we got the Chiefs and the Packers. Kansas City favored by 6, the over under 42.5. Thoughts on this one?
Kansas City. The defense has been legit. I think the offense does enough to win this game by a touchdown. So I'm going to take the under, a little bit lower scoring, mainly because I think Jordan Love's just going to be kind of at a loss here against the Kansas City defense. But nevertheless, Chiefs win. Chiefs win.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right there. I've got the Chiefs winning pretty comfortably in this one. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but the Kansas City defense has been very legit on this one. Definitely, shows up week in, week out, and can definitely hold this one on the underside of this thing. So much so to the point that we've seen this a couple of times come to play this season, that the defense for Kansas City has been so good that it actually negatively impacts Patrick Mahomes' fantasy output. And I think that this is one of those types of games here. Right. We were talking about the fact that Kansas City doing some really good things there. I think that they find a way to turn over Jordan Love. And when he has a prop that is only 0.5 interceptions, I'm taking the over on that.
I like it. I'm going to take Jaden Reed under 43.5. Right. I think the Chiefs realize that he's their gadget guy. And they have Rashee Rice, who is very much like him. So I think that's going to help having the scout team defense and have a guy very much like what Reed does. So I think Kansas City, with what they've been able to do on defense this year, is going to shut him down a little bit.
Absolutely. All righty. So again, guys, if you have any questions, comments, anything like that, throw them in the chat. Let's go ahead and we'll rock and roll through those things here real quick. Real quick though, let's go ahead and hit up the Monday night football game and we'll get this thing rocking and rolling here. So Bengals, Jaguars, Jacksonville favored by 8.5, the over under 38.5. Thoughts on this one?
I'm taking the Bengals to cover. Now, I do think Jacksonville wins this game, but I think Jake Browning having another week, I think Cincinnati, I think they're trying to prove something, right? They're not just going to roll over. And I don't know that I am confident enough in Jacksonville for them to cover such a big number. I think being at home helps them. So they might be able to do that. But I am going to take Cincinnati and I'm going to take the over. I'm going to say we see some points in this game with Jacksonville ultimately pulling it out, maybe by a touchdown. That wouldn't surprise me so much. But the 8 and a hook, 8's such a odd NFL score, and 9 is possible, but it's not very common score to win by either. So you're basically saying it's 7 or 10. And I just don't know that's gonna be a 10 point. I could see a backdoor cover keeping this under the 8.5.
Yeah, I can definitely see that backdoor coming into play, but as much as I wanted to go that route, I don't know that I can trust Cincinnati to put the ball into the end zone, put points up to do this. Jacksonville's defense has been good, not great, but they've certainly been good enough to kind of hold opponents down and squeak out some wins here. So I am going to take Jacksonville to cover. I am going to take the under on this one. I think this could very well be a game where we just see Jacksonville get up by 10, 14, and they just kind of, cement it away. So that being the case, I do think that Travis Etienne has a pretty decent game, though, and I'm looking for him to go over 15.5 receiving yards.
Taking Christian Kirk over 49.5 receiving yards. I think that's a little bit low for him. We see him in that 55 to 60 range.
Yep, I really I like that one too. I thought his prop was a little low as well. So like it. All righty. Question coming in here. This one from Bryce over on YouTube. So Hawkinson's on a bye. Schultz is out. Would you play Logan Thomas or Cade Otton in a full PPR?
Bye. Schultz is out. Logan Thomas, Cade Otton.
For me, it's Thomas, but it's close.
Sorry, I'm going through and looking at my sheet here. Honestly, I'd tell you that this is a coin flip. Over the last 4 weeks, Miami and Carolina are back-to-back in rankings as far as points given up to the tight end position. Miami's given up 10.17. Carolina's given up 9.9. I mean, so there's really not a whole lot of difference here. The yardage has been just about the same. Carolina's given up 1 touchdown, where Miami has not given up a touchdown to the tight end over the last 4 weeks. So, I I do think it's a coin flip. I think Logan Thomas probably has a safer floor just because of what Sam Howell will do, and I think they're just gonna have to throw the ball more. I think Carolina is gonna be able to try and run the ball and stay a little bit balanced. And when in doubt, at the moment, I trust Sam Howell and what he's done at the quarterback position more than what I trust Bryce Young's been able to do in Carolina. Or excuse me, Cade Otton, Baker. What Baker is coming off of here the last couple weeks, because he's had some down weeks here the last few. We need him to bounce back and remember he has 2 all-pro wide receivers.
Absolutely. This is one I'm going to lean Logan Thomas, but I'm right there with you. I'm kind of subscribing to the coin flip there as well. So it is Logan Thomas by a hair for me, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that I think he's got the safer floor, right? Like Logan Thomas is really good for 4 receptions for 40 yards, right? Like, so when you're looking at the tight end position, yeah, he's pretty reliable for about 7 to 8 points a week to it. Cade Otton probably has the bigger ceiling on this one, bigger shot for upside on that. But yeah, he's also got the lower floor there as well. Like Cade Otton, wouldn't surprise me if we see him get to 10 points. Wouldn't surprise me to see him get like 4 points this week. Whereas I think Logan Thomas is going to be a pretty safe 6 to 8 points for you. So that's kind of how I would look at it and how I'd play that one. So Bryce, it really is going to depend a little bit on what you need as far as your matchup goes, right? Like if you need somebody to get you 8 points so that you win your matchup, I'd go with Logan Thomas. If you're playing from behind and you're going to need a little bit of upshot, it's going to be Cade Otton.
Fair enough. I'm good with that.
Ajiji bringing the hard questions in here. For the kickers, rest of season, who would you do? McManus, Lutz, Groupie, or Koo?
Yeah. I'm thinking Koo, just because as weird as Atlanta's been, they've never been out of it.
Right.
And technically, because Tucker missed a field goal last week, Young Hoku is the active career leader for field goal percentage of over 100 attempts. So, I mean, he's been the most consistent as far as getting points. So I think I'd lean Koo, then McManus, then Lutz, I think.
Yeah. I mean, some of that too, when I'm starting to look at kickers, I'm looking rest of the season, I look at the offense as a whole, and I look at it from a standpoint of, okay, what team is going to get into the end zone more often, right? Like the Jaguars probably are going to get into the end zone more than the Falcons will, right? So, but the Falcons have been doing a good job getting the ball inside field goal range and allowing kicks to take place there. So, while McManus may, while the score on those games might be higher, I think Koo's going to get more opportunities than any of the rest of these guys, and that'd be the route I would lean as well. As usually saying, thanks, appreciate it, guys. Great job as always. We try. So, all right, guys. If you have any other questions, let's throw them in the chat. Let's get those things talked about. Let's get these week 13 burning questions knocked out here. We're going to start wrapping it up here, but if you guys have some questions, we'll make sure we hit those up before we go. So while we're waiting to see if anybody has some questions for us, any final thoughts out there kind of for the viewers and listeners?
No, good luck, right? For those who are still fully engaged, hopefully success is on the horizon, and you are able to make the most of that here in the weeks coming up. So best of luck, good fortune to you and your fantasy rosters.
I like that thought. I like that thought a lot, right? So we're coming down to it. We got this week, next week for most leagues, and then it's playoffs starting. So if you are in the mix, if you're in the hunt, let's make sure that we get that. Go out there, get those victories, get those W's. And even if you've secured your spot, let's make sure that we're you punch your ticket into the playoffs. Let's make sure we're getting the seeding and making that road to the championship a little bit easier for us. So I like it. Well, guys, I'm not seeing any other questions coming in here, so I think we're going to call it a night. But you can always find us on the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, at Good Old Boys FF. And the best place to go and support this independent podcast is to head on over to the YouTubes, click that subscribe button, ring that bell for all the notifications. We'll be back on Tuesday, rocking and rolling through the weekend recap there. Looking forward to Thursday night and the pines and shines, all the good things there. And we'll see Alex back on Tuesday as well. So that's going to do it for us. He's Kevin. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe. Toodaloose.